For most people that start a carnivore diet, they will lose a bunch of weight, regulate their blood glucose, and improve their overall metabolic health. But there's a small subset of people that can go carnivore and not lose any weight at all or see any improvements in their insulin sensitivity or overall metabolic health. For them, it can feel like nothing will work and it can be incredibly frustrating. My husband Goran is one of those people. In December 2022, he and I both started the carnivore diet, and about 18 months later, I had lost almost 50 pounds and he had lost nothing, sometimes even gaining a little bit of weight. What was different about my husband's metabolic health that had him responding so differently to the same foods? Well, there's a few things. First, Goran is a 49-year-old male. He's an electrical engineer and he's worked at a desk for the bulk of his adult life. From the ages of 22 to 42, he was morbidly obese, weighing anywhere between 300 to 400 pounds at his heaviest. During that time, he ate a standard American diet, which consisted of a lot of fast food and high-sugar, ultra-processed foods. In 2016, he decided that enough was enough after stumbling upon the book Wheat Belly by Dr. William Davis, and then that led him to the Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung, and he learned a ton about low-carb diets and fasting. Goran used keto and water fasting to lose 130 pounds between 2016 and 2017. This got him down into the 270s, where he has remained plus or minus 20 pounds. For me, I'm a female, I'm 41 years old, and I've been up and down in weight, but for most of my life, I've been a normal weight. I've always been pretty physically active and worked non-sedentary jobs. I did eat a standard American diet for the bulk of my life, and I also dealt with drug and alcohol addiction in my teens and 20s. So Goran and I are very different lived experiences and metabolic health profiles. While my body was responding very well to just eating close to zero carbs, his body was not, and in fact, his metabolic health was declining a bit. His blood pressure was inching higher, as well as his overall blood glucose as measured by a continuous glucose monitor. Neither of these numbers was anything too bad. His BP was like 130 over 90 or maybe 150 over 100, and his glucose averaged between 100 and 130, but it definitely wasn't trending in the right direction. For those of you that watch this YouTube channel often, you'll know that I do a lot of N-of-1 experiments on myself involving a lot of blood work. So we decided to run some blood work on him and discovered that his fasting insulin was in the high teens to low 20s. He had elevated hsCRP, homocysteine, and ferritin, which are all indicators of inflammation. His triglycerides were in the 200s. His HDL was in the 20s. We got him a keto mojo meter and discovered that he was almost never in nutritional ketosis, even without eating any carbs. He would struggle to have ketones between 0.1 and 0.3 millimoles per liter after weeks and weeks and weeks of having zero carbs whatsoever. This didn't make a lot of sense to us because we just assumed that if you're not eating carbs that you would be in nutritional ketosis, but he was not. The final clue that we were dealing with some stubborn insulin resistance came in June of 2024 when we headed to the Hack Your Health conference and we got him a DEXA scan. We discovered that he had almost 9 pounds of visceral fat. Visceral fat is the fat that's inside your body, the trunk of your body, around your organs, and you do not want much of it. It is a very clear indicator of insulin resistance. It was at that point that we decided we needed to have a bit more aggressive of a strategy to get this insulin resistance under control, which in turn would reset his metabolism so that it would respond correctly, respond the way it should to an ultra low carb diet, which is lower overall blood glucose levels and fasting insulin along with weight loss. He didn't want to use pharmacological interventions until we had exhausted all other options. So we decided to get back to what we knew worked for him, which was an ultra low carb diet paired with water fasting. We spent June and July dialing in different fasting lengths and also nutrition and exercise. And in August of 2024, we implemented our new protocol. Goran would do one water fast per month of 10 to 14 days in length. And when possible, we would throw in a couple of shorter fasts of 3 to 5 days. Whenever he was eating, he was doing the carnivore diet or a keto diet. If he did have plants, it would be like a salad or maybe some Brussels sprouts. Movement-wise, he did some walking and light strength training 1 to 3 days per week. And then we settled on monthly DEXA scans and blood work along with continuous glucose monitoring to measure our progress. Our ultimate goal is to resolve this insulin resistance, and the way that we know we're making progress is through lower overall visceral fat readings and improved blood work markers along with overall weight loss. I hypothesize that there's going to be some point where like a switch is going to flip and his body is just going to start responding the way it should to an ultra low carb diet. I didn't know if that was going to be at a certain level of visceral fat loss or maybe overall weight loss. And we haven't quite hit that switch flip moment yet, but we are getting close. Our latest blood work and DEXAs are from February. I actually shared this as my speech at the Collaborative Science Conference and shared all the data. And I know a lot of you have been really looking forward to this experiment because there are some of you out there that have really, really stubborn weight that will not come off, and you're doing everything right, but it's just not working. So I wanted to share with you my husband's results because hopefully this can give you some ideas of something that will help you. But before we dive into these blood work results, I'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Element Electrolytes. Element was a big part of Goran's carnivore journey. He really loves the raw unflavored packets and the watermelon packets. Element is an electrolyte brand that has 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. We travel a lot. We're currently traveling as we speak, and we bring like bags of these packets with us because they travel so easily. And whenever we need a boost, we need to improve our hydration or our electrolyte levels, we can just open one of these packets, put it in 16 to 24 ounces of water, and you're good to go. On a carnivore diet, I think the raw unflavored packets are the way to go. They don't have any sweeteners, no maltodextrin, no flavors, nothing like that. Just the minerals. I also really like the sparkling waters. These sparkling waters come with the electrolytes pre-mixed. They're absolutely delicious. They do have flavoring in them, but they do not have maltodextrin. So I think those and the raw unflavored packets are excellent choices for the carnivore diet. Right now, Element is offering my viewers a free sample pack with any order. So if you'd like to give them a try today, you can head over to drinkelement.com/JennyMiddich. That's DRINKLMNT.com/JennyMiddich and get your free sample pack with any order today. Let's start with the blood work, and I'm going to put some slides up on the screen so you can see the data. First off, we're going to talk about fasting insulin. In June, we started at 10.5, and in October, you can see we got down to a 2.9. That was after a 10-day water fast, so that was pretty amazing. We did have a bit of a blip in January, but you can see in February we were back down to a 5.5. Next up is A1C. We started at 5.6 in June, and the lowest we've gotten was a 4.9, and then it hovers between a 5 and a 5.2, currently 5.2. As far as triglycerides go, we started in the 200s, and the lowest point we saw was actually in December in 94, and then we had kind of a blip of 319 in January, and now at a 161 as of February. Now, the cool thing about measuring your blood work monthly is you can see what's going on here. We can see there is some improvements and changes, but we also would never have been able to see that big blip in January. And I don't know if maybe that was because he had lost a lot of weight, and sometimes your triglycerides can go up temporarily. I don't know if maybe that was just a testing error or something like that, but we wouldn't have known that that was a data point unless we were measuring. Next up, we have HDL cholesterol. Now, Goran's HDL is always pretty bad, in the 20s and 30s. We can see the highest point we've gotten was in December at 35, currently at 28. I think the HDL is actually going to be one of those switch flip moments where he will start to respond more to the carnivore diet. Like, I think maybe once his visceral fat levels get down to under 1 pound, perhaps his HDL will go up as well. It will be very interesting to see. I also wanted to touch on a few other markers, including some inflammatory markers and vitamin D. So his HSCRP has always been above a 2. We have not been able to get that lower than that. We did see this big jump in October. I think that might have been because we tested him after a 10-day water fast instead of fasting for 12 to 14 hours. So I think that that was just an anomaly. But we have not been able to get his HSCRP below a 2. His vitamin D is another one of those markers that's kind of like HDL in that we cannot get it any higher than like 38. But that's even with supplementation, that has been holding steady there. We have seen a bit of a decline in his ferritin. His ferritin has always been a bit higher, but we have been able to get it down to around 600 now. That's just another inflammatory marker that I think is going to improve as he continues to lose weight. Let's move into some continuous glucose monitoring data. I want to show you this because I want to illustrate how important it is that Goran is really consistent with this long water fast and then really strict carnivore, because the minute he starts to go off of plan, his glucose starts to inch up. It's incredibly frustrating. So you can see the average glucose in September and October was really good, 94, 92. And then in December and January, when we were not able to be as strict, 101 and 109. it's very, very frustrating. If you move into variability, variability is just a measure of the peaks and valleys in your glucose, and you want that to be very tight, 15 or less. You can see in September and October his variability was a 15, and then December 22, January 16. Moving into the sleep average, September 90, October 87, and then in December 95 and January 104. And then where we see the biggest impact to his glucose numbers is in his morning average. You can see in September 91, October 90, we were able to do those really long water fasts, but then December 97, January 110 on average upon waking. It's just so clear in the data, and it can be very frustrating, but that's just kind of another, I guess, motivating factor for us to make sure that we stay on track. I want to move now into the DEXA scan data. We're starting with total body fat percentage. We started around 42.5%, and as of February, he's at 36% body fat, so a significant loss there. And I also wanted to touch on the total lean mass, because when you are water fasting, there's a fine line between water fasting and starving, and that line is your lean mass. You don't want to be losing extensive amounts of lean mass. Now, you're going to lose a little bit because the lean mass reading on a DEXA scan is not just muscle. It's water, muscle, blood, nerves, organs, any contents of your stomach and things like that. So you want to make sure you're staying, within a 2-pound range. And you can see here, his lean mass has been between 133 and 135 pounds this entire time. So he has been losing fat mass. And now the visceral fat reading, you can see that we took him from 9 pounds of visceral fat in June down to 5 pounds in February, almost a 4-pound loss of visceral fat. When we started this experiment, Goran was 270 pounds, and as of the beginning of February, he is down to 218 pounds. He is doing great. Our plan is to continue this protocol until we get him between 190 and 200 pounds with under 1 pound of visceral fat. We'd also like all of his blood work to be in the optimal functional medicine ranges. So for these optimal functional medicine markers, this is what we're going for with the blood work. First off, we want his fasting insulin to be between a 2 and a 6. We want the fasting glucose to be under 90. Of course, this is all within the context of a ketogenic diet as well. We would like his HSCRP to be below 1. His vitamin D to be between 60 and 80, his ferritin to be below 300, his triglycerides under 100, and his HDL to be above 50. So these are all based on low-carb doctors in this space, lots of books that I've read here. This is kind of like the optimal what you want ranges when you are looking at blood work. We have a ways to go with Goran on these optimal numbers, but at least we know, what the target is. And be sure to take a screenshot of these numbers, because these numbers are super healthy for everybody out there. These are numbers that everybody should be aspiring to. We have some key takeaways from this ongoing N of 1 experiment. The first of which is that you can remain insulin resistant even if you're not consuming any carbs. But there are a few clues that this is happening. Elevated glucose, fasting insulin, blood pressure, triglycerides, and other inflammatory markers are great clues that you are still insulin resistant, along with high levels of visceral fat. The second takeaway is that fasting paired with an ultra-low carb diet and light movement is highly effective for improving insulin sensitivity. Goran saw his best visceral fat losses when he was exercising 1 to 3 days per week, 1 hour per day, along with very strict carnivore when he was eating, and then that 10 to 14 day water fast. We did this in August, September, and October, and he had his best visceral fat losses. Over the holidays, when we had less opportunity for those longer fasts and less exercise, he had less visceral fat loss. I do think it's important to note that not all weight loss journeys are linear, so you're not going to just see, a path downwards like this. You're going to see ups and downs, and that is totally normal. Consistency is key, but as long as you're making some progress, that's great. The third takeaway is that fasting should be considered in people that have normal to elevated BMIs, because they have a lot of energy to tap into. Goran is an experienced faster, and he has a lot of energy stored on his body. But when he got started, he first started with intermittent fasting and then experimented with longer and longer fasts. 10 to 14-day water fasts are probably not necessary for most people, and some people see similar benefits with protein sparing modified fasting or sardine fasting. The fourth takeaway is that without measurement tools such as the continuous glucose monitor, the blood work, and the DEXA scan, we would have had no idea what kind of progress we were making. It is essential to have some way to measure your progress so you'll know what's going on internally. The next takeaway is it's not just about the food, it's also stress and sleep. Goran had been dealing with some extreme stress from the summer of 2023 into 2024, and I think that contributed to his elevated visceral fat levels. The sixth takeaway is that Goran's overall inflammation does remain elevated. We think this may be due to the high stress nature of his job, but we also think that visceral fat is causing some inflammations. But I do think that as that continues to decline, his inflammation levels will also continue to decline. While it can be incredibly frustrating and mind-boggling when you're not losing weight on a low-carb diet, you are not alone, and there are levers that you can pull to get things moving in the right direction. I'm going to put links in the description to The Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung and Wheat Belly by Dr. William Davis. These two books are what Goran read in the beginning of his weight loss journey, and they're very helpful if you have not read them yet. I'm also going to put a link to a free month of Audible so that you can listen to these resources for free if you would like. I've also listed out all of the different blood tests that we order on ownyourlabs.com to measure his progress, and I've also put a link to where you can look up where a DEXA scan is in your area. The final link I have for you is a link to the continuous glucose monitor app that we use. We use NutriSense paired with a Dexcom 7 CGM, so if you would like to do some continuous glucose monitoring, I'll put that link as well. Like I said, this whole experiment here was actually a speech that I did at COSI this year, the Collaborative Science Conference, that is Dave Feldman's conference. It was in Vegas in February. It was super fun, and I know at some point Dave is going to be releasing all of those speeches on his channel, so you'll be able to see the actual presentation of this, but I really wanted to share all of this information with you here. So if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. If you are running into an issue where you're not losing any weight on carnivore, let me know that as well. I do have coaching hours available, so if you would like to dial a few things in or come up with some kind of like fasting protocol for yourself, we can definitely do that. I'll put a link to that in the description as well. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.